Does your brake pedal on your Audi A4 feel a bit stiff? Well, it can actually not be the braking system, but the vacuum system. My name's Cole from FCP Euro, and today we're going to show you how to replace the vacuum pump on your 2-liter equipped B9 Audi A4. In front of us, we have the Pureberg vacuum pump kit that we've assembled here at FCP Euro. This kit includes a vacuum pump by Pureberg, an L-ring gasket that seals it to the block, and all the hardware and seals that we're going to need for this job. Here at FCP Euro, we've seen these vacuum pumps fail anywhere from 60 to 100,000 miles, but it really just depends on the condition of your vehicle. Now, some symptoms that can indicate that something in this vacuum system is going wrong include some oil leaks. It likes to leak from the face of the pump to the block. The actual pump itself can leak oil around the backside of it. And we can have oil leaks around where the high pressure fuel pump goes. Now, some other things that can happen is this pump can actually not put out enough vacuum. And some ways that we can figure that out initially is if we have a hard brake pedal or we have some kind of vacuum leak. And that can be from hearing a hissing sound in the engine bay or even having a check engine light referring to some kind of lean code. Now, a way that we can detect if this vacuum pump is putting out enough vacuum source, we can use a Lyle gauge as pictured here. Now, we offer this on our website, and it's really nice because it's color-coded, so all we have to do is hook it up to the vacuum source on the pump, start the engine, and make sure that the pump's putting out enough pressure. And speaking of tools, let's get into the tools that we're going to need for this DIY. We will need an arrangement of sockets. We'll start with a 10mm socket, M10 triple square, and 24mm socket. Some different size of extensions is definitely handy. We'll need a torque wrench that will be able to go from 10 Newton meters all the way up to 40 Newton meters. Some ratchets for our sockets. An open-end 10mm wrench is helpful. 19mm wrenches for the fuel lines. A pair of cutters, needle nose pliers, 90-degree picks, marking devices, something to scrape off the old sealant. A magnet is nice to have since we'll be working in the back of the engine bay. You always want to wear safety glasses when working with the fuel system. And to test the actual vacuum pump, we have a Lyle vacuum tester that will be linked in the description below. Some lubricants and cleaners that you're going to want to have include some brake clean and glass cleaner. If you are using a torque wrench to tighten down the fuel lines, you'll need a Volkswagen specialty tool T40434, or you can take a Lyle 19mm socket for a fuel line and shave it down to fit. And with all this covered, let's get into this DIY. Here in the engine bay, we can remove the engine cover by just pulling up gently. It's on some studs here that it just pops on, so we'll pull that off. And we're gonna show you where you can check for the vacuum source on this vacuum pump. Looking at the top here, there's going to be a vacuum line that goes just to the pump, and it's going to be right here. So we can actually remove this clamp, put our vacuum gauge in there, and check to see if our vacuum pump is working properly. This is going to be an Oetiker clamp right here. You can try to spread the clamp and get it so you can reuse it. However, if you cannot spread it, you can always take a pair of cutters, snip it, and then replace it afterwards. Now, taking a 90-degree pick, we can get underneath of this hose and separate it from the plastic piece. Be very gentle here. We do not want to damage the hose or the plastic pipe. We can also use some lubricant. In this case, we're going to be using some foaming glass cleaner to help get this rubber piece off. There we go. Take the vacuum gauge, insert it into this hose, and then we can start the engine and check for our vacuum source. Taking a look at our vacuum gauge here, we have enough vacuum for our system. If the needle is in the red, you're going to have to replace our vacuum pump. And with that, let's show you how to do it. Now, if you went ahead and checked the vacuum system already, you're going to want to reconnect this line, but we're going to do that later. We can now come down here and disconnect this plastic fitting from the vacuum pump. You're just going to squeeze this fitting together on both sides and wiggle it out. Since this is in a tight area, using a 90-degree pick to come underneath here to release the tabs can help sometimes. To get it a little bit more out of the way, we can come down here to this vacuum hose and pull it off. With that connection off, we can unclip this brake vacuum hose right here from the holder, and we can slide it this way a little bit. We have to remove the high pressure fuel pump, so we'll start disconnecting this electrical connector here and then pulling off the low pressure fuel line. There's going to be a lock on this connector. and then we can take it off. Disconnecting the fuel system, you always want to have safety glasses and be very cautious because fuel can spray everywhere. So we just want to make sure that it's not going to get in our eyes or get into some spot we don't want it to. This fuel line is connected to this bracket here, so we're just going to pop it out. And then grabbing a shop towel, we will place it around this fuel fitting to capture any fuel that drips down. And then there will be 2 tabs on this fuel line connection right here. We'll depress those, push down, and then pull up. Now this low pressure fuel system is going to be under pressure, so we want to be careful when disconnecting this line. There will be a good amount of fuel coming out. Just use a rag to capture all that and just take that fuel line off very, very slowly. On the back side of here, we're going to use a 10mm socket to remove these 5 pieces of hardware. This is a longitudinal engine, so it's going to be a little bit trickier in the back here. If you have a transverse version of this engine, it might be a little bit easier. That 5th 10 piece of millimeter hardware is going to be located by the catalytic converter, and it's nice to have an open end wrench here to break that bolt free. With all the hardware off this plate, we can pull the oxygen sensor wiring out of the holders here and then remove this plate. Coming to the back side of the engine, by the intake manifold, we're going to use a 19mm open-end wrench, or in this case, we have a shaved down 19mm Lyle fuel line socket that we will put over this nut here and then loosen that fuel line. Get that line cracked loose, and then we'll just loosen the rest of the nut up by hand. Now, coming up to the other side of the high pressure fuel line, we're going to loosen that junction at the high pressure pump and then remove the nut. We can now remove that high pressure fuel line. With an M10 triple square socket, we can come and loosen these 2 bolts. We're going to just crack them free, and then we'll loosen them in a back and forth pattern to release this high pressure fuel pump. Now it's important to do a back and forth pattern here because this high pressure fuel pump is under tension and we want to slowly release it out of the vacuum pump. Now with this loose, we can thread these bolts out by hand and pull the high pressure fuel pump. We can then come down here, place our finger down into this bore and remove this bucket that rides on the camshaft. We can now use a 90-degree pick to release this vacuum line off the back of the pump here, and then grab a 10mm socket to remove the 3 bolts holding this vacuum pump onto the block. You can also use a T30 socket if you do not have a 10mm socket, but most of us at home have a 10mm socket. And there's 3 bolts holding this vacuum pump onto the block. These bolts are one-time use, so we can discard them when we're done taking them out. With this last bolt here, we're just going to counter hold the pump, and then we can remove it. Now we're going to head over to the table with our old vacuum pump and high pressure fuel pump to change over the gaskets and transfer over some parts. Now our old vacuum pump here, we're going to have to transfer over 2 things. One of them is going to be this plastic bracket. So using that 10mm socket, we're just going to zip these bolts off real quick, slide this over to the new vacuum pump, and then tighten these bolts down to 10 Newton meters. After that, we can grab a pair of needle nose pliers, pull this retainer up for the line that goes on the back, and transfer it over to our new vacuum pump. We can get underneath of it to help pry it out. It's just going to be held in by friction, and then we'll transfer that over. We can take the old vacuum pump, set it over to the side, flip over the new vacuum pump. We could take the new L-ring gasket and position it on the vacuum pump here. You're going to want to make sure that the tabs on the gasket are facing towards the pump, and the red part that is sealant is going to be facing outwards. So we'll just position this here and just push down, making sure that gasket fits in all of those bolt holes. And when we have it properly on there, it's not going to fall off. Setting this to the side, we'll grab our high pressure fuel pump now. With a 90-degree pick, we'll get underneath this seal, remove it, and then replace it with the new seal included in the kit. With some fresh engine oil on our finger, we can rub it around the seal and prepare it for installation. Now let's go back in the engine bay, prep the block for the pump, and then reinstall it. Before installing the new vacuum pump, we want to take as much of the sealant off and clean the surface area. So we're going to use a plastic razor here just to scrape off all that old sealant from the other gasket, and then we'll use a little bit of brake clean to just make sure this is clean as possible. We have some brake clean on a rag here because we do want a little bit of that engine oil still on the camshaft, so we're just going to clean around it. Now, one thing to note here, before installing our new vacuum pump with all the seals, we want to position the pump itself, this keyway, in the same way that the camshaft is going to be angled. Now, we can look at the old vacuum pump, set them side by side, and then match the rotation of that keyway. We've already done that off camera, so we're now going to lower this vacuum pump into the engine bay. You'll have to rotate the pump a little bit to get it lined up, which we just did, and then we're going to slide it back to line up all the bolt holes. Grabbing the 3 new long bolts included in the kit, we're going to thread these in by hand and then come back and tighten these in 2 steps. With a 10mm socket, we are going to tighten down these 3 bolts first to 8 Newton meters and then come back and rotate each one an additional 90 degrees. To rotate these bolts 90 degrees, we're just going to put a mark on the bolt, and then 90 degrees away, we are going to put another bolt mark. We can now grab some new engine oil. We're going to be using some liquid moly here, and we can lubricate the bore of this new vacuum pump. This cavity is filled with engine oil naturally, so don't be afraid to get some engine oil all in here. We can grab that high pressure fuel pump bucket and lubricate it as well with engine oil. This is also a good time to inspect this. Make sure the roller is not failed and there's no weird wear marks on this bucket itself. Everything feels good, so now we can install this into our new vacuum pump. There is going to be a notch here that is going to line up with the notch in the pump, so we'll just make sure those are aligned and then slide it down. Now in this case, when we removed our high pressure fuel pump, the camshaft was rotated in position where we had enough space to take it out without having to compress this piston on the high pressure fuel pump. Now if you run into a scenario where you can't thread the bolts in and walk down the pump slightly by tightening side to side, you can rotate the crankshaft so that bucket is sitting deeper down in the vacuum pump. And to do that, you can use a 24mm socket to rotate the alternator to rotate the crankshaft. In our case, we don't have to do that, so we're gonna grab our resealed high pressure fuel pump and slide it back into place. So with that, we'll take the hardware that we removed earlier, thread it in, and then we'll walk that pump downwards by rotating side by side and tightening these bolts. Now you wanna do about a half turn of rotation every time you tighten this, because we do not want to install this pump in crooked. So we're just watching our pump here as we tighten it downwards to make sure we're not rolling that seal. And we'll snug these up and then come back with our torque wrench to tighten them to specification. With our M10 triple square, we will tighten these 2 bolts to 25 Newton meters. Grabbing our high pressure fuel line that we removed earlier, we're going to take a little bit of engine oil and just apply a small light coating to the ball of this fuel line. We'll repeat that process on the other side. This just allows the fuel line to move around freely, and when we're tightening it down, it will help locate it. Now we'll position this back into the engine bay, install it to the high pressure fuel pump and the fuel rail, and then tighten these junctions down to 40 Newton meters. This fuel line does only go on one way, so make sure you have it oriented properly. We're just threading these nuts on by hand, and then we can use that fuel line socket or a 19mm open end wrench to snug them down to 40 Newton meters, or you can use a torque wrench. Before we lower that heat plate, we're gonna take this vacuum line, clip it into this holder, and route it over to where it's gonna be connected. Now, grabbing that heat plate, we're going to slide it into position and install the 5 pieces of hardware. Using a 10mm socket and our torque wrench, we're gonna tighten these 5 pieces of 10mm hardware to 10 Newton meters. We can now clip this oxygen sensor wiring harness back into the holders here on this heat plate, slide our fuel line back over to our high pressure fuel pump, clip the line back in. We want to make sure we tug on this line a couple times to make sure the fuel line is not going to come off. Then we can clip it back into the holders here. After that, we'll take our wiring for the high pressure fuel pump, plug it back in, and push down the lock. Now, since we disconnected this hose so we can test the vacuum here, we have a new clamp that we'll link in the description below. We're going to slide that on, slide this hose back onto the plastic line here. Sometimes a little bit of lubrication goes a long way. Some glass cleaner we're just using here. We're going to slide this on, clock it in the right position. So we're just going to line it up here. Then we'll grab a pair of diagonal cuts to clamp this clamp down. All right, we got that nice and tight. So then we'll take that glass cleaner that we used earlier, lubricate the seal on this fitting and that barb, take the cap off of our new vacuum pump here, and then clip everything into place. Then we'll take the vacuum line down here and reconnect it onto this fitting. And the last thing that we have to do here is reinstall our engine cover. Just make sure that we line up the pins to where they pop in. And then give the engine cover a good tap because we just successfully replaced the vacuum pump on our 2-liter equipped Audi B9. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. And if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, drop them in the comment section below. And if you want to see more 2-liter Audi B9 DIY content, be sure to hit that subscribe button because we have a lot more coming. My name's Cole from FCP Euro. Thanks for watching and keep on wrenching.